He lived alone, spoke little, and wanted nothing from the world. But one dying man's final words shattered everything Everett Cain thought he knew about life, love, and fate. A stranger, bleeding and gasping for breath, handed him a crumpled paper and a trembling young woman hiding in the back of a wagon. "She's yours now," the man whispered before slipping into death. Everett didn't ask for a wife. He didn't ask for a past soaked in secrets, or for the broken girl who couldn't even remember her own name. But when she finally spoke, when her first fragile words left her lips, they shook him so deeply. He stood frozen, heart racing, because what she revealed wasn't just tragic, it was dangerous. Behind her silence lay a storm of betrayal, a child not yet born, and a man with power who would kill to get her back. This isn't just a story about a cowboy and a girl. It's about the moment a hardened man found someone worth dying for. And once you hear what she said, you'll understand why nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Stay with me, because what happens next will break you. Before we dive into this unbelievable true story, take a moment to subscribe to Legacy Ignited. Every like, every follow helps us share more powerful stories that the world needs to hear. If this story touches your heart even once, let it show. Hit that like button and stay with us till the end. You won't forget what happens next. The wind howled across the empty plains as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the dry land. On the edge of nowhere, a loner named Everett Cain saddled his horse and wiped the sweat from his brow. He was a man of silence, built of calloused hands and days too long, months too quiet. Since losing his parents in a fire at 16 and his younger brother to the war, Everett had carved a life of solitude. He didn't need anyone, and no one needed him. That's how it had always been, until that day, when a stranger came dying into his life and changed everything. It started at dusk, just as Everett was herding back his cattle. He saw something in the distance, just a shimmer of movement. At first, he thought it was a deer, maybe a lost coyote. But as he rode closer, the shape became clearer. A man slumped against a broken wagon, his face pale, shirt soaked in blood. Everett dismounted, cautious, hand near his rifle. But the man raised a trembling hand and whispered, "Help me, please." Everett knelt beside him, scanning the scene. There were wagon tracks, hoof prints, too many. The man had been ambushed. Who did this? Everett asked, but the man didn't answer. His eyes fluttered open, and he pulled something from his coat, a folded paper and a rusted locket. "Take her," he rasped. "She's inside the back. She's yours now. Protect her. Please." "Wait, what are you talking about?" Everett asked, stunned. "Who's inside?" But the man's hand dropped, and his final breath left with the wind. Everett stared at him, shaken. Then he stepped around to the back of the wagon, slowly pulling aside the canvas. And there she was. A girl, no, a young woman, huddled in the corner, wrists bound, eyes wide and terrified. She looked maybe 18 or 19, her dark hair tangled, lips trembling as she stared at him like a ghost. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Everett took a breath, cut the rope from her wrists, and held up his hands gently. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "The man outside is gone. He told me to protect you." The girl stared at him, unmoving. "Do you speak?" Everett asked again. "Can you tell me your name?" Her lips parted, but she only said one word. It was so soft, Everett barely caught it. "Promise." "That's all, just that." Then she collapsed into his arms. He carried her back to his horse and rode through the night, the stars overhead the only witnesses. At dawn, he laid her gently on the bed inside his ranch house and wrapped her wounds with careful hands. She didn't wake until evening, and when she did, she sat up fast, eyes wild, looking around like a cornered animal. Everett approached slowly. "You're safe," he said. "You're at my ranch. No one can find you here." She didn't answer, just stared at him like he was the question to a nightmare she didn't remember dreaming. Days passed. She wouldn't eat much, wouldn't speak more than a few words, and never gave him her name. Everett built her a room across the hall from his. He cooked every meal, left water beside her bed, and never pushed her. He thought about riding into town, but something about her, something fragile and haunted, told him the world wasn't safe for her. Not yet. On the fourth night, she came into the kitchen where he was cutting wood for the stove. Her steps were hesitant, but she stood there, looking at him with heavy eyes. "What's your name?" Everett asked again. She looked down. "I don't remember," she whispered. He set down the knife, drying his hands. "You don't remember anything?" "Just pieces. His name was Callum, the man who gave me to you. He said he owed you a debt." Everett frowned. "I never met him before." She nodded slowly. "He said if something happened to him, I was to belong to you." "Belong to me?" Everett echoed, uneasy. "You're not something to own. That ain't how this works." Her lips trembled. "Then why did he say you'd be the only one who wouldn't hurt me?" Everett felt a tightness in his chest. He didn't know the answer to that. He didn't even know why fate had dropped her at his doorstep. But he couldn't look at her, those bruises on her arms, the hollow in her voice, and not feel like he was meant to protect her. He pulled out the paper the man had given him. Inside was a marriage certificate. It had Everett's name and hers, but the spot for her name was only signed with an X. "He forged this," Everett said, laying the paper down. "Does that mean we're not married?" she asked softly. "No," he replied. "It means someone tried to claim you without your say-so. But that paper don't own you. I don't own you. You're free." She stared at him, and then, for the first time, she stepped closer and whispered words that made Everett freeze. "I'm pregnant." The silence after those words was louder than any thunder. Everett stood there, breath shallow, the floor suddenly too far beneath him. "I didn't know," she continued. "I found out just before we were ambushed. Callum wasn't the father. He was helping me escape from someone terrible. That's why we were running." Everett's voice was low. "Who?" She shook her head. "He's a powerful man. A cruel man. If he finds out I'm alive." Her voice cracked. She sank to the floor, covering her face. Everett knelt beside her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You ain't alone anymore," he said. "You don't have to go back. Not ever." She looked up at him, and for the first time, there was something behind her tears. Hope. Fragile, flickering, but real. Still, Everett's mind spun. A stranger had given him a wife with no name, a hidden child, and a past wrapped in shadows. And now, she sat in his home, terrified, exhausted, and carrying a secret that could bring danger to his doorstep at any moment. He didn't know her name, but her first words, "I'm pregnant," had shaken the quiet, broken open his old world, and forced him to step into something far more complicated than he'd ever known. Everett Cain, the loner rancher who never wanted company, now had a woman to protect, and an enemy he couldn't see coming. Everett didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his porch, staring into the dark horizon, shotgun resting on his lap. The girl, his so-called wife, lay inside, exhausted from fear and truth, curled beneath a wool blanket that barely covered her shaking shoulders. Her words haunted him like a restless spirit. "I'm pregnant." He didn't know who had done it to her. He didn't know her name, and he didn't know how far this shadow stretched. But he did know one thing. If someone came looking for her, they'd have to go through him first. Morning brought no peace. As Everett stepped inside to prepare coffee, he found her already awake, sitting at the table with her hands folded, eyes red but determined. "I remembered something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name. It's Lena." He stopped, met her eyes. "That's a start." She nodded slowly. "There's more. The man I ran from, his name is Judge Merritt Shaw." Everett froze. That name hit like a hammer. Judge Shaw was no ordinary man. He was a powerful land baron 2 counties over. Rumors whispered about how he ran courtrooms and cattle alike, with blood on his hands and no law above him. If Lena had escaped him, then this wasn't just a matter of protection. It was war. "I was his ward," Lena said, looking away. "Or that's what he told the world. But in private, he controlled everything I did, who I saw, where I went. When I turned 18, he said he'd make me his wife. That's when Callum, his old friend, found out and helped me run." Everett clenched his jaw, every word digging deeper into his gut. "And now you're carrying a child." She placed her hand over her stomach, as if shielding the life inside her. It's not his. It was someone else, someone Judge killed when he found out. Callum tried to save me. He paid for it. Everett sat beside her, his voice firm. You won't go back, no matter what he sends or says. Not while I'm still breathing. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't be that easy. By noon, Everett hitched his horse and rode into the nearest town, Dry Hollow, a speck of dust on the map, where silence ruled and folk minded their business. He stopped by the telegraph station and wired an old war friend, Tom Briggs, now sheriff 2 towns east. Need information on Judge Merritt Shaw. Urgent. Dangerous. Then he picked up supplies and headed back. When he returned, Lena was standing by the barn, her hand resting gently on the horse's mane. She turned to him, her eyes softer. You came back. I said I would. She stepped forward. Why are you helping me? You didn't ask for this. Everett looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he saw something beyond the fear, strength, even in her brokenness. Because no one helped my mother when she needed it, he said quietly. I won't let that happen again. That night, just after dusk, a figure appeared on the ridge. Everett spotted the glint of a rifle under the moonlight. He moved fast, grabbed Lena, pulled her into the storm cellar, and sealed the door. Stay quiet, he whispered. No matter what you hear. He returned to the porch and waited, shotgun ready. Minutes passed. Then a voice called out from the dark. You've got something that don't belong to you, Cain. Everett stepped forward. I don't know who you are, but you've made a mistake coming here. I work for Judge Shaw, the voice said. He wants the girl. She's carrying his property. She ain't property. She's a person, and she ain't leaving with you. A pause, then a chuckle. Then we'll take her from your corpse. The shot rang out first, missed Everett by inches. He dove behind the water trough, fired back, clipped a figure running in the dark. The night exploded with gunfire and shadows. 1 man, 2, 3. Everett moved like a ghost, steady, silent, focused. He dropped one near the fence, another by the barn. The third ran. When silence returned, Everett limped toward the cellar. His arm was grazed, bleeding, but he barely noticed. He opened the door, and Lena rushed out, eyes wide with panic. Are you? I'm fine, he said, gripping her shoulders. They're gone. For now. But they both knew this wasn't over. The next morning brought a reply from Sheriff Briggs. Judge Shaw's men seen heading west. Last witness against him disappeared. Careful. He's buying silence. Everett read the words twice. Then he looked at Lena. He'll come himself next time. She didn't flinch. Then we face him. That evening, Everett sat with her beneath the stars. She turned to him and asked, Do you believe in fate? He shrugged. Didn't used to. But then a dying man gave me a wife, and her first words nearly broke me in two. Now I reckon anything's possible. Lena smiled, just barely, and rested her head on his shoulder. In the stillness, Everett felt something shift. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. But the night wasn't finished with them. Just before dawn, Everett woke to the sound of hooves. Dozens. Dust clouding the horizon. A black carriage leading them. Judge Merritt Shaw had arrived. Everett stood tall as the carriage pulled up. The door opened, and a man in a dark coat stepped down. Silver hair, cold eyes, and a crooked smile that held no mercy. You've been busy, Cain, Shaw said, harboring a fugitive, interfering with justice. Everett raised his rifle. This ain't justice. It's slavery. Shaw's gaze darkened. She belongs to me. No, Everett said, his voice like steel. She never did. Lena stepped out from behind Everett. Her voice rang loud, clear. I'm not yours. And I never was. Shaw's lip curled. You think this man can protect you? I don't think it, she said. I know it. Everett stepped forward. You got 10 seconds to turn that wagon around. Shaw's face twisted, eyes blazing. You'll regret this. Everett cocked his rifle. Not as much as you will. The standoff lasted only a breath longer. Then Shaw turned, climbed back into his carriage, and disappeared into the dust with his men. But Everett knew better. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. Weeks passed. The ranch grew quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet Everett Cain had once known. This quiet carried warmth, of footsteps in the hallway, of a kettle on the stove, of a girl slowly remembering who she was. Lena wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. She began tending to the garden out back, humming songs she thought she'd forgotten. Her laughter, still rare, sounded like music Everett didn't realize his heart had been starving for. And every evening, she'd sit on the porch beside him, watching the sunset bleed across the plains. The child inside her grew stronger, and so did she. But the threat of Judge Shaw still loomed like a storm cloud. Everett knew men like him didn't forget. They waited. They struck when no one expected. One morning, Lena brought out a letter sealed in wax. Her hands trembled as she handed it to Everett. "It was in the locket Callum gave me," she said. "I never opened it until now." Everett unfolded the letter. It was from Callum, written in the final days before their escape. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. I chose to give her to you, Everett, not because I owed you, but because you're the only man I ever trusted to do what's right. She's not a burden. She's a beginning. If you let her, she'll save you too." Everett's hands tightened around the paper, his throat thick. That night, as stars painted the sky, Lena stood in the doorway and said softly, "Everett, I don't want to be your responsibility anymore. I want to be your choice." He rose, walked to her, and looked into her eyes, the ones that once held nothing but fear, now full of courage and quiet hope. "You were never just my responsibility," he said. "You've been my choice since the moment you said your first words." Lena's voice broke. "Even though I was carrying another man's child?" Everett nodded. "Especially then, because you needed someone to see the woman, not the past." Tears welled in her eyes. She took his hand and placed it gently on her belly. "Then we're yours, if you still want us." He pulled her into his arms, voice steady. "I do." And in that moment, something shattered inside him. The walls he'd built, the silence he'd lived in, the pain he'd buried deep. All of it fell away. He had a family now, not chosen by blood, but by purpose. When spring came, Lena gave birth to a baby girl. Everett held the child in trembling hands, eyes wet with something he hadn't felt in years, peace. They named her Hope, and though Judge Shaw would one day return, Everett no longer feared the knock at the door, because the loner rancher who once lived only for himself now had something worth protecting with his life. And he would, always. Thank you for staying with us through this unforgettable journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share it forward. And if you believe in the power of true stories that speak to the soul, subscribe to Legacy Ignited. Until next time, take care of yourself and never underestimate how one act of kindness can change someone's world forever.